Gadget UK here again. As you can see, this time I'm looking at an Amstrad CPC, 64K colour personal computer, CPC. I'm not sure what version this is until we get in there. I'm not that familiar with the different revisions. What I do know is I've spoken to Novabug, and he has made me aware, you know, there's quite a few different revisions. And just looking on his channel, actually, just watching one of his recent videos, he's got a pristine example of one of these that he picked up. I'll stick a link down below to that video. It's well worth watching. It's in exceptional condition, the one he's just picked up, and it's got a subtly different logo here, so that's one clue, you know, of the different revisions. But there's different board revisions within inside. Some of them have got longer width boards than others, and maybe even slightly different chips and things on there. I think I saw one revision that's got like a quad flat pack gate array. This one, I think, has got the dip style, and there's a few different revisions of the dip style gate array, which we'll come on to later. But yeah, I've wanted a CPC, believe it or not, for well over 30 years now. I had fond memories, you know, in the playground and stuff at school of, you know, talking to people who owned Amstrad CPCs, and there were quite a few people. You know, they were quite a popular machine. They weren't that mega rare really. But one of the things with CPC is whenever I got a game for the Spectrum, because that's what I had at the time, you know, you look on the back of the box there, it would always show a couple of screenshots, typically, usually three actually in most cases, of the Spectrum, C64 and Amstrad. And the Amstrad always looked the best because they kind of got a fairly good resolution, but it made really good use of colour. You know, the C64 games tended to have a bit of an odd colour palette, a bit like the Spectrum did, you know, kind of a fixed colour palette. I mean, maybe the CPC's got a fixed colour palette, so something that I've not looked into, but the palette was quite a good choice if it was fixed. But they seem to make you really good use of the colours on CPC games, you know, that was one thing that really appealed to me. But I can also remember distinctly in the standing in front of a shop window there. Now, the town I grew up, you know, nearby was a little town called Poulton, and there was a shopping centre there, the Tynemouth Centre, and I used to go in there with my mum when mum was shopping. You know, she'd drag me and my brother around and stuff when we were kids, and I can't remember where she went. She went into the chemist or something. While she was in there, me and my brother were sort of stood around outside and would stare into the shop window of Radio Rentals, I think it was, that was nearby. You know, the two giant sort of show windows there where you could see all the systems and you know, computers and things they had on display in the window, and they always had a number, 2 or 3 at least, of the different CPC models with the you know, typically colour screens, you know, and they'd be running demonstration type programs, you know, showing off the different colour modes, and they'd have like 3D rendered shapes and polygons and things. You know, I remember like a triangle thing sort of spinning around different colours, different coloured lines being drawn to the screens. It was just like, as a kid, it kind of blew me away, you know, because I was, let's say, I came from the era of the ZX81, and I'd only just recently got a Spectrum, but the way this system looked, you know, it looked really professional. I mean, look at the width of this system here. You know, this was before the Plus 2, well before the Plus 2. You know, it just looked, you know, and even this bit here, it kind of, there's something kind of, I don't know what it is, something kind of attractive about this here. It's bizarre. It kind of reminds me of on the Master System, I think, where you've got this weird thing with blocks that show you some sort of, I don't know, connectivity thing. I mean, it's not really conveying much information other than, you know, a monitor, a tape, and a key, you know, a computer. It doesn't really show you anything, but it just kind of looks a bit geekish, you know, kind of technological. I don't know. There's something attractive about that whole thing there. It's bizarre. I never really stopped to think about it until now, but it's exactly the same thing. Like, say, you look at a Master System, you've got a similarly pointless series of boxes and coloured blocks and things there, but it kind of pulls you in. Certainly as a kid of the 80s, you know, it's amazing stuff. And obviously, you know, like I say, you can see here, you know, these have got the tape deck built in and stuff, but the keyboard was super nice on these as well. You know, it was a real keyboard. I guess that's the other thing that was attractive with these versus the Spectrum or the ZX81, etc. of that era. And even the Commodore 64, really, you know, I think these have got a lovely keyboard because you've got a separate number pad here with a little enter key as well. You've got the dedicated direction arrows here with a copy button. The one thing I know about that from something I read many years ago is when you get BASIC up, you can actually use these with I think you hold Control or Shift, and you can move a second cursor around, and then you can copy to copy blocks of text. You know, that was quite cool having two cursors. I don't remember another version of BASIC allowing you to do that. So you know, there were lots of nice features built in right from the very start with these systems. So this one was picked up faulty. Well, it wasn't actually. It was picked up as untested, which typically means faulty. You know, untested on eBay. In eBay terminology means I've tested it, I've found multiple faults with it, I've tried to fix it, create some more faults with it, and I'm now describing it as untested. So, you know, and you can thank Dave Curran for that sort of general overview of what that eBay ad means, actually. And I'll perhaps post a link to Dave's post below, because it was something he posted and many of us have thought over the years, but he posted it on his blog a number of years ago, something very similar to that. And it made me laugh. Yeah, so untested, which equals definitely, probably faulty. So I've got a SCART RGB lead for this, as you can see. The power inputs are 5V DC, I'll show you that in a sec. And this SCART adapter comes with a pass-through, and that's because all you've got is 5 volts going into the CPC here, unless there's a step up or something to 12 volts. I don't think there is. I don't think there's any of the voltages on here apart from 5 volts. So in order to switch your TV into RGB, you know, on one connection in the SCART lead there, I forget which pin it is, you need roughly, you know, 5 to 12 volts at least, you know, to be able to switch it. So that's what the pass-through comes through. You know, you can just either plug the power supply straight into the CPC, or in this case, you know, connect your RGB cable, connect your power supply into the pass-through, and then click, you know, connect that in there into where the power goes in. So that should, in theory, switch my TV into RGB mode. And I'll just show you the power supply here. This will be a separate video, I think, because we'll tear this down and have a look inside. It's probably going to need some recapping and stuff. Yeah, Amstrad module MP1. So this has got an extra DIN on the back there, which is designed for the monitor. And that's another interesting thing with these. As far as I understand, you had to get a monitor with these. They didn't come with any other way of connecting it to a TV. I'm sure you probably could. They probably had like a modulator unit or a cable like we've got here that would allow you to connect it to a TV, but for the most part they came packaged with a monitor. You know, you could either have a monochrome one or a colour one. They may have had different colour monitor sizes, I'm not sure. I know there were quite a few different revisions. In fact, you can see one of the nicer revisions on Novabugs' recent, you know, 464 video that I mentioned earlier, because he's picked up a lovely, you know, brand spanking new example of one of those monitors there, and he's got a few of the other ones as well, as far as I understand. So at some point I'd like to perhaps get a monitor for this, but right now I do not have the space, if I'm completely honest. I don't actually have the space for this, but I will be keeping it, because like I said, this is something I've really wanted for a long time. I did mention to Novabug, actually, when I met him at Play Expo 2 or 3 years ago. It was when Monkey Spaz last went. I think it was over 3 years ago. That I wanted one of these, you know. I said, I'm going to get one, I will get one, you know. And I think he thought I was talking crap, you know, because it's took me a long time. You'd think that if I really wanted one of these, I would have had one of these on my channel right from the start. But I think the problem is that I get pulled in different directions. I think the Amstrad CPC has been on my list. It's been on my wish list for 4 years now. After I first got my 1200 ST, before my channel started, the CPC was quite high up on my list, but I just kept seeing bargains. What I did see on eBay is lots of 464s, and they seem to be around the £20 to £30 mark. And I've kept my eye on them, you know, week in, week out for the last 4 years, and they haven't gone up in price. You do see ones that are restored, that are cleaned up, and you know, someone's replaced the tape belt and said, "Oh, it's completely restored, £200, please." But the majority of them on there are £20 to £30. For fully working ones that say tested working, powers on, plays the tape, £30. You know, you can't go wrong really. So like I say, other stuff has taken priority. Where I've seen, you know, a C64 at £10 faulty, I've had no choice to think, okay, I better buy that actually, because it's only 10 quid. And I've seen this, you know, C64s have gone up and up and up, whereas these have remained stable. But I think the same thing's going to start happening with these. Yeah, so other things have kind of taken priority. I've always seen some of the rare system that I wanted to fix that was, fairly cheap. A good example is, I was about to buy one of these just after Christmas, and lo and behold, I saw a CD32, that was faulty. It was affordable. I thought I really got to get a CD32 now, and that was it. Ching, budget wiped out until February. And then similar things have happened with the PC Engine and stuff. A friend, let's say, sent me that PC Engine CD system. That's then dictated my spending for last month, and then we're into March now. So this is March's purchase. So you'll see the power light comes on, and if I adjust the volume, that works. So you can hear there's a bit of noise coming from wherever the speaker is in here. Keyboard doing nothing. If I press rewind, you can see it rewinds. Fast forward. So we've got some power there. Press play, nothing. So I'm guessing this is a bit like on the C64, where you've got to actually press type the command in or press a key combination. I think Control and small enter should start playing, and it's not doing anything. So we'll just whip the lid off. So I've switched it on here, and if I just point you at the screen, and bear in mind, like I say, the TV is set to auto switch, there's nothing. We've got nothing on the screen. I have switched through all the different SCART channels there, just to make sure it's, maybe the auto switching's not working, but there's just nothing. And if I press keys on the keyboard, I get nothing. Now, if I show you the tape deck, let's just, this is a good test for voltages and things. You can see we can fast forward, we can rewind, press play. Nothing, nada. Now, my understanding, this was from a bit of research, and I did double check this with Novabugs. If I press Control and small enter, and then press a key, the tape deck should start moving, and it's not. It's not doing anything. And the fact that I'm getting no video whatsoever, and I've tried this on a couple of different TVs actually, and I did also connect this up to an old CRT, and it's important to note the reason why, because we see you've got the blue screen here. This is kind of presented by the LCD TV when it can't lock onto a signal. So if you've got a signal that's maybe got a bit of a screwy signal, the sync's not quite right, or the levels of that signal are not quite right, on an LCD or plasma, you won't see anything. It'll just present this blue or whatever colour screen to say, I can't find a signal. But if you connect it up to an analog TV, as I did earlier, you may see some difference. We may have some bands or bars or something displaying, with some frequency issues there, and then that could give you some insight into, well, actually it's outputting something when you switch it on. You're getting a messed up picture, but maybe it's something to do with the video output side of things. Maybe there's a problem with the sync, etc. But we're not getting any of that. There was nothing. When I connected up to the monitor earlier, there was nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing. Nada, zero, zip. Like it's completely flatlined. So we've either got a major problem with the CRT chip on here, the VDP, and I've ordered one of those in advance. It's not arrived yet, just on the off chance that that's the fault. But it's always nice to have spares, and I will order a few more spare chips for this, or perhaps get another faulty system. So I've just removed the screws. There's 6 screws around the edges here. And we'll just have a look inside, and I'll just show you what we're going to do. The first thing we need to do with something like this, any kind of black screen or completely dead system, 2 things you should do. Obviously, well, 3 things you should do. First, do a visual inspection, have a look around. Now, we've got some really mucky connections and things here. I'll see if I can find the cotton bud. Yeah, there's a cotton bud in here. I'll just show you what came off the board. So one of the first things I did here is just clean up these connectors with a bit of IPA, because they were, as you can see, absolutely filthy. I'm not convinced that's not something to do with it at this stage, because you can see how bad it is. And they do look a bit oxidised or corroded or something if you look at them. So, yeah, I mean, we can deal with that later. We can clean those up with a fiberglass pen, as Dave Curran mentioned, or a little wire brush, which I'd probably do, and then get some flux on there, and you can actually recoat those with solder, because that's all they are. They're just tinned with solder, those on both sides. So we can get that looking super good. We can clean the board up. But beyond that initial inspection, the next thing we need to do really is measure the voltages. Easy way to do that is on any of these 7.4 logic chips here. I'll show you, we'll measure from the ground. The ground's always the pin furthest away on TTL from pin 1. So pin 1's down here. Let me just put the camera down. So the easy way to measure 5 volts on something like this is on any of the TTL logic. So we find one of the 74 chips here. Pin 1 is down here nearest the notch, and the ground is always the pin furthest away from pin 1 on the same side, you know, of the chip there. So ground is down here, and then it's diagonally opposite up here is VCC. That top pin there, you can see there's a bit of a copper exposed on that pad. Yeah, so that's going to be 5 volts. So we can measure the 5 volts that way. Bear in mind some systems may have more than you know, just 5 volts on there, but at this stage all I'm interested in is the 5 volts. Bear in mind it's only got 5 volts coming in from the DC jack there. So we'll measure that, and then the next step, because this is doing nothing, is going to be to either get the logic probe, you know, and go around some of the connections, maybe the data bus and the address bus and the CPU here, just to see if we've got some life. But I'll get the scope out. We'll perhaps do the same thing, but we can measure, I think it's pin 6 on a Z80, should have the clock. We'll see if we've got a clock there. If we don't have a clock there, then we'll have to backtrack. But I mean, I'm guessing, to be honest, with something like this, it's probably going to be the CPU. I did power this up a minute ago, and the CPU was fairly warm, actually. Everything else was absolutely stone cold. But there was, when I say fairly warm, it was just lukewarm. After a minute, the CPU gets lukewarm, and everything else is stone cold. So, yeah, I mean, I've got spare Z80s if we need to swap that out. I don't have any of the other spares. Like I said, I did order, it's this one down here. This is the CRT generator, you know, your VDP. Got a PIO chip here, you know, so that's for serial parallel interface, you know, to the outside world. Your AY sound chip here. That's a focal point, I guess. It's the same sound chip that's used in the Plus 2, Spectrum Plus 2, and the Atari ST's got kind of like an enhanced version of the same thing. So you do get some fantastic music on CPC games, actually, and that was something else that really, you know, appealed to me as a kid growing up. I really wanted one of these because the sound capabilities as well as the graphics, they were just absolutely phenomenal compared to, you know, a basic 48K Spectrum. Your Amstrad ROM there, I think. And then we've got a load of TTL logic along the bottom here. And then you've got 8 4164 DRAM chips here. And I think the data bits are not in parallel. So all the address lines are connected up in parallel. But you've got 1 bit on each one of those, which is why there's 8. So if any one of those fails, the system is gone as a whole because you're missing a whole bit. And that might vary actually from board to board. You know, they're going to be different revisions where they've got different types of RAM on there, I would think. And then the gate array, which is kind of like ULA. You know, it's got some address decoding, the backbone of the system sort of logic. I think it does some clock divisions and things, you know, to feed out clocks at different speeds to different things. So quite a simple system really, and I do like, you know, I have to admit, I do like this motherboard here. You know, you can see the Amstrad silk screen here, and it needs a lot of clean-up, this board, but it's a really nice board. So it uses these flexible ribbons, as you can see here, just to slide into the connectors. So one thing I would say is when you're working on one of these, don't be connecting and disconnecting this every minute or two while you're testing various things to try and, you know, work out what the fault is. If your system's booting, try and leave this connected all the time while you're working on the system if you can, for, you know, as much time as possible, rather than to keep removing it and sticking it back in, because these wear down. Every time you put one of these in, it'll wear the surface down and you risk breaking it. But at the moment, I think that's okay. I mean, we don't really know until we power this up whether the membrane's any good, because, you know, like a lot of these keyboards of this era, the membrane can be a source of a fault. You know, it can be a problem. So we'll perhaps have a look at the tape deck in another video. I'll perhaps you know, replace the belt. I mean, we might need to replace the belt in this video if it's not playing cassettes and things. But I mean, it's certainly fast forwarding and rewinding without issue. So we're powered up, and as I described, meter probe there on the bottom right pin, you know, just furthest away from the side of pin 1 there, let's see if I've got a shot, to the top left pin there, diagonal opposite, and as you can see, 4.9 volts. So yeah, we've got, you know, got a reasonable 5 volt level there. It's a little bit low, but I think that's okay. And it's also mega critical to mention something else while we're at it. 5 volts comes in, there is no regulation on this board. And as far as I can see, there is no overvoltage protection on this board. So you're at the mercy of whatever power input you put in here. If you inadvertently, mistook that, that this connector here and put a Mega Drive 9V in there, or a SNES 9V. In fact, those actually output more than 9 volts. They're usually 10, 11, 12 volts. If you stuck a Mega Drive or a NES or a SNES power connector in there, which will fit, it's pretty much the same size as far as I can see, that DC barrel there. It's bye-bye most of the chips on the board. So that is something to be mega careful of. And in my case here with this, one of the first things I did before I powered it up actually is just to measure the 5 volts coming into there before I switched it on, and I think it's measuring 5.25 volts or something. It's a nice clean level. It makes some interesting vibration noises, that power supply. You can hear the transformer or some coil whine or something coming from it. So it perhaps does need a recap. It's perhaps not the best thing to be using to test this, but it is outputting 5 volts. I'm happy with that just for the moment. What I might do is do a mod to this later. It might be another video. I've got one of those little 5 volt saver PCBs that came from Hans, Biwak, and all you do is you feed your 5 volts in it, and then the output side you stick to your destination where the 5 volts needs to go. So your 5 volts just passes through the board, but if the voltage goes up above, say, 5.4 volts, it will just cut the power instantly. So that's a mod that I think I will do to this. I will cut the trace wherever the 5 volt gets fed as it lands on this connector here, stick that little board somewhere on there, solder a couple of wires and join them up in the relevant places, just to make sure that if the voltage, a supply to this ever goes over 5 volts, it will save the system. But just feeling around these chips now, again, they are absolutely stone cold. I mean, like refrigerator cold, like suspiciously cold, which makes me think there is no clock on this system. The funny thing is, though, the CPU is just a little bit, not a lot. It's not stone cold like everything else is. But you see, the clock, as far as I remember from looking at the schematics a few months ago, goes through that 40010 there, the gate array. In fact, when I looked at it, I was looking at the 40007 last time. But I think this is just an equivalent. They seem to have two different revisions there. It's a bit weird. I'm not quite sure why they would have both sockets on this board. It may just be to make best use of stock levels. It might be, I mean, in some ways you could argue that was a good idea by Amstrad. Why not have both profiles on there? You've got the space on the board, there's plenty of space here, and then if they've got none of these available but some of those available, they could just use them. So yeah, very curious the way they did that. But so the next thing we need to do now is have a look at the clock. Right, so I've pointed you at the scope. We need to put it onto DC coupling here. Yeah, so there's no clock at all on pin 6 on the Z80, so we've not got a clock. And I'll show you in a window within a window here. You should be able to see the clock. We've got a clock there. And the other place I know we've got a clock is from this crystal here. It goes into the first two pins here are joined together on this gate. Is it a NAND or something, or a NOT? It's a 7404. So those first two pins, yeah, it's going to be a NAND, I think. Those we've got a clock signal on, and we've got a clock signal on the output. Now, the funny thing there is the clock signal then goes from that fourth pin there, from pin 4. The clock signal should go out to this pin here. Now, what I've just done is put my meter on continuity and check between this pin here, where the clock signal would go if we had this revision, for 0007 revision of the gate array. It would go to this pin, and on this chip here we should have connectivity between that pad and that via there to one of the pins there, so because the clock signal needs to come out this buffer here, and it needs to come into the gate array to divide the clock out to go to the Z80 and wherever else it goes to. But there's no connectivity. I'll just show you that. And if we just measure around this chip here, yeah, you'll see there's just nothing. Nada, no connectivity. So we seem to be losing, somehow we've lost the connection between the clock coming to here. It's not coming across to this chip here. So I need to have a look at the pin out of this now to work out where the clock should come in. So we should have a short there from that clock pin, which we've traced to the the 40007, to pin 24 of the 40010, and there's nothing. A bit of resistance. Now, if I just probe to, you're not going to see it, but there's a via just next to it. There's a short. I'll just show you where that is. You can see So you can see where that is. That's the wire there, and you can see it looks a bit dirty. I think we've got corrosion. It's a corroded trace. So what I'm going to do is just solder a little wire on the underside of that wire there directly to pin 24 on the socket, and we'll just see if that fixes it. We've got a bit of flux. Let's just add a bit of solder to the iron here and just tin that connection if we can. Yeah, you can see just about we've got a little blob of solder. You see that? So we'll just get some wire. I've got some single strand here of this. It's phone wire actually. It's ideal for something like this, just a single strand, because it doesn't want to be very long. It wants to be super short. In fact, let's just cut the tip off there. So there we go. That's one side done. All I need to do now is just pull it down here to pin 24. Snip it off as close as possible, and then the sheathing on that should melt if I just get near to it. It's quite prone to heat actually, so we just get a little bit of solder on there. That's it, we've got a join. So I'll just test that on the meter and we'll give it a try. So I've got it all connected up. Let's see what happens when I switch it on. Nothing. Oh yes. Oh yes. That's working. So we've not got a perfectly clear display there, but I've read a few things about LCD TVs that you can get kind of like these, the ghosting sort of thing, and there might be corrections and fixes and things you can do to get that better, but actually that seems to be working. So what I'm going to do now is just connect the keyboard back up again, because you can see it's not connected at the moment. We'll rewind the tape and we'll just see if we can get it to load. So let's see what's going on with the cassette deck now. If we press play, and then it should be control and small enter, it says press play on tape, then press a key. Oh yes. So I'll just point you at the screen there, and fingers crossed, and toes as well, and let's just see what happens. I can hear it. That's a good sign. Oh yes. So still loading here, and obviously there's going to be a lot of clean-up work here. The board is absolutely filthy. It really is. Not sure if that's crashed or whether we're going to get a title screen. Yeah, I think it's going to load the title screen hopefully. So these are the things I would point out about this board as well. The lack of electrolytics. There's pretty much no capacitors on there, aluminium caps whatsoever. So I think I'm going to mod this, actually stick a cap on there. You're at the mercy of the quality of your power supply. If you've got a really decent 5-volt power supply, you're alright. And obviously that will need recapping. We will strip that down in a separate video, the power supply unit there. And just see what state that's in. But that could be why we're getting a bit of noise and stuff on the display as well. Actually, that looks really clear. Look how sharp that is. That's amazing. But it's working. Yeah, I'm so pleased. I had visions last night that I was going to need new gates array for this, or I have actually ordered on the in advance of this actually a VDP. I thought, let's just take a punt really, and I saw one pretty cheap. It was like £5 or something for a VDP chip, brand new, working and tested. So I've ordered one of those. I've got Z80 processors. I could have swapped one of those out if that was the issue. I've got spare RAM, if that was an issue. I might see if we can get spare gate array at some point. It's useful just to have one, in stock kind of thing, really. Or I might just do what I usually do and just get a second one of these as a spare standby system. But this is just brilliant. I'm really, really chuffed. You can see that, the colour. This is what I like about the Amstrad, and the reason, like I say, coming back to my comment earlier about why I was kind of envious, because the colour. You just got much more colourful games compared to the Spectrum. Spectrum tends to be quite monochrome, in a lot of instances. But the colour on the CPC is superb. These Amstrad CPCs were really nice machines. They were perhaps just let down a little bit in terms of the performance. Maybe I'm not sure what the reason for that. Whether it lies in the way that the graphics are implemented, or whether it's the actual CPU clock speed. I think it's the CPU clock speed. I could be wrong. I'll have a look in a minute, and I'll perhaps stick an annotation up just to show you what the CPU speed is. It might be 3.5 megahertz, like the Spectrum. I'm not sure. I don't know whether they went slower, and maybe that's the reason that these, some games don't run quite as well as they do on the Spectrum. But I think part of that was actually due to lazy ports. The same thing happened with the Atari ST and the Amiga. If you look at some games that are pretty poor on the Amiga, it's because they literally took the Atari ST version and ported it and did very minimal changes to the Amiga version. And the same thing is true of the Spectrum and Amstrad CPC, because they share the same processor. The similar specs. Obviously the CPC's got more memory, but because they both use the Z80. Programmers tended to do lazy ports. So you got a Spectrum version initially, and it was kind of backported to the CPC. With, again, very little in the way of optimization for the actual hardware itself. The graphics and sound hardware. The sound tended to be okay. I mean, sometimes you find that some of the sound was converted actually from the ST version to the Amstrad, and that's true of Xenophobe. If you look at Xenophobe, you'll find that the music on the ST version is almost identical to the CPC version, and the CPC version looks fantastic. That's one game I really want to get for this system. It's a really good 8-bit port. Oh yes, stop the tape. We certainly will. Press gear. I'm not sure what gear is. I might need to connect a joystick next. Yeah, let me connect a joystick up. Now, we're not going to get speech because we've only got 64K. I think Novabug pointed out, if you've got the 128K system, or you've got the 64K RAM pack, you get speech on this, but let's just see. I'm not sure if we get any music or anything here. Yeah, this joystick is absolutely awful. I'm surprised there was no music there. I kind of expected some music actually. Turn it down a bit, it's way too loud. In fact, it's coming through the speaker. Let's just turn the speaker down. Let's just listen to the TV instead. Because it's stereo as well, that's the other nice thing about the system. I think my cable's wired that way, but we just didn't seem to have any music. Let's do a turbo. Yeah, you can see actually it runs really well. I mean, it's a little bit slow. You could argue it's just, it's quite slow, but it's an 8-bit version, and I actually think this is as good as, if not better, than the Spectrum version. I agree with what Novabugs said in his review of this game. It's a fantastic port. It really is, especially with the speech and stuff on the 128K version. So I think the next thing I need to do here now is just clean this up, because it is in an absolute state. I mean, look at the inside of the case. It's really, really dirty. It'll be useful once I've cleaned this side up here to see. I mean, you can see where the flux has leaked through there on that pad going to pin 24 there. But it'd be interesting to see what's actually happened to that. Can we see the corrosion there? But I'm guessing that's what it is, because you can see, the fluff has all been on the edge of the board here, and it does look like it's kind of like a moisture. Is that a moisture there or something? Maybe this is being stored in a loft or a barn or somewhere like that. That could be what's happened there. I mean, it might be a case of I really should consider removing the socket there and re-socketing it. But yeah, a clean-up will tell. I mean, all the other connectivity's there, and obviously the system's seems to be behaving normally at the moment. But we'll clean this up, we'll get the board out and get some IPA on there, and it's going to be a lot of work with cotton buds. So I've got my ESD underwear on, and we're on the ESD mat here. Look at that, that's absolutely disgusting. This is a really good candidate for an ultrasonic bath if you had one. I mean, it's a large board, it could be difficult trying to fit one in there, but it is a real look at that. It really is a good candidate for something like that. I mean, you could stick something like this in the dishwasher. It's not something I would recommend. People do use dishwashers. I mean, I guess if you then wash it down later with IPA and distilled water and stuff, and just make sure the board's dried off properly, you might be okay. But the big problem is dip sockets like that. Moisture gets under there. You're better off taking the chips out first, but moisture can get in the socket and underneath the socket and stuff. It's really super hard to get it out. I mean, you can use hot air or something to dry it down with afterwards, blow the board down. That's one way of making sure you get the moisture out of there. but I'm just going to do it this way initially and then use cotton buds to get into the small gaps, but you can see how bad that is. Yeah, and this is the area I've been looking forward to doing up here. This is just so bad. Oh, look, oh, horrendous, absolutely horrendous. Yeah, this qualifies as the dirtiest board I've seen so far, I think. I mean, I had some pretty dirty MVS boards, but this one takes the biscuit, I think. Yeah, this is one of those times where I wish I had a dishwasher. As much as I wouldn't recommend using a dishwasher, if I had a dishwasher, this would be going in the dishwasher, because it is so bad. It just really is horrendous. It's going to be 30 to 40 minutes for me cleaning this up easily. So we're getting there. I've had a pretty good go over that. I just need to get the final bits off there, just go over the tops of the chips and in between some of the traces and things. What I'll have to do is pour some IPA over and brush, I think, as a final pass of stuff, but I've got most of the muck off here. I mean, it's really dirty, and it's a good job I did this because there are one or two other traces that look like they start to corrode. So it's yeah, it needed this to be done, definitely. There's one down here you can just about see. Can you see those down there? I'll just zoom in a little bit. They're a bit dark looking. There's a couple there, and there's one or two other places as well. So hopefully you'll agree that's looking 1,000 times better, actually. The connectors at the top there, the expansion connectors, they need cleaning. I'll do that in a sec, I'll show you. But if you look in the light, that is just super clean compared to what it was. It's perhaps the odd streak. But yeah, it's probably taken me the best part of 30 minutes at least to clean this. I'll show you the pile of cotton buds and paper towels in a minute, but yeah, you can see that's almost good as new now, actually. So there we go, they've got progressively cleaner as we've got towards the top here, but I mean, just look at the state, you know, it's been absolutely filthy, that board. And just a quick look on macro here, you can see some of the traces. They've not been rusted through, they haven't completely corroded, but can you see it's a bit dark, that trace? That one's a bit dark. I'll test connectivity again just to make sure, and it's the same here. Can you see these two here? Just the very surface start to be affected by some corrosion there, I think. But yeah, I mean, I could scratch the surface off and tin those up with some solder, you know, use some flux and solder braid to drag over, like I've done on other videos, but I think I'm going to leave them for the moment. The coat's still there, they look okay, I'm aware of them, and I think there's just one more somewhere else. I can't quite remember where it was now, but yeah, there's 4 or 5 of those around the board. And you can see the one there that went to pin 24, you know, through this via here to here. So yeah, you know, that's where the corrosion's got, that one. Actually, it would be foolish to leave those as they are. I've just scratched the surface off just gently, going to get some flux on there and just coat them with some solder, use the solder bed to drag over, because they are, you know, they were started to corrode. So I've got some solder and flux, just drag it over the trace now. I'll show you a close-up in a minute so you can see what result that's left on the trace there. If you're not careful, some of the silk screen can come off, but should be okay, I think. So there is a lot of flux and stuff on the underside of the board. I'm not going to clean all that off. It was there from manufacturing, it's been okay for the number of years. You can see how the underside here is not corroded like the top side is. So the easy way to do this is just with an eraser here. You can see a lot of that's coming off actually. So hopefully you can see the contrast between the one I've done there and the one I haven't. You know, there is a noticeable difference. One thing I will point out is I've just had to scratch off the surface of that via there because that was corroded. Under inspection there was some rust all around it. So I'll need to reflow that as well, and I'll do the same from the other side, just to make sure that that via doesn't become a source of failure in future. But as you can see, look how dirty this side is here. It's going to be the same thing, eraser and then use some IPA to wipe over it. And wherever there's corrosion, I mean there's a little bit there, can you see? A fiberglass brush is probably the best thing, but if I just scratch gently with this here and then just get the IPA on that again, that'll come off, I'm sure. It's just ever so slightly corroded, not a lot. So there we go. I reflowed that via, cleaned up both connectors on both sides there, looking super clean. The board's looking super clean, so we just need to deal with the rest of the case and the keyboard now. So just quickly testing it here after cleaning the board up. It's a good job I tackled this area here with the 3 or 4 wires and traces and things that were corroded here, because when I powered it up, well, it did the same thing again, black screen. Now I checked, not black screen, just nothing at all, completely dead on the LCD. Now I suspect if I connected this up to a CRT, we may have seen a black screen. And the first port of call was, well, actually the main area we focused on here is here, so it's got to be the ROM. It's got to be a case of the CPU's not booting. So I did some connectivity tests. I followed these wires from the source to the destinations, and they all worked apart from, see, this little one here where it's a very short, just a wire straight to a pad, and visually it looks like it's perfectly joined and it's tinned all the way across, but there was no join. So on the other side I've just soldered a wire from the wire to the pin, again just like I did on the gate array. So yeah, this is a case of in the sink for the plastic parts. Actually, there's no way to avoid it. So with the power LED here, I'm going to just desolder it here and reattach it afterwards, just so that I can move the cassette thing out of the way. It's the easiest thing to do. There's lots of covert screws. So it's took me about an hour to go over the top and bottom side. You can see pretty clean. Inside and out, but we now need to deal with the keyboard, so I'm going to try and pull these off. I'm not sure. We'll inspect as we try to do this. Some of them are going to be very difficult to get off, like shifts and spaces and things like that, large keys, because of how they're clipped on, but we'll just see if I can get one of these off. There you go, that's clipped off. Hopefully I haven't damaged it. Yeah, and spring. So I'll take a photo of all the keys here so I know exactly where to put them back in, and remove each one and scrub them all down in the sink. I think there's actually 2 springs in there. Can you see that? There's a little spring on the underside there as well. And of course a keycap puller is going to be the best thing for this, but if you're just careful, pull them straight upwards. Certainly the small ones won't be an issue, but like I say, shifts, the shift keys, enter, any larger keys may have like little clips on there to hold them on, so you might have to be careful with those. Heavens to Betsy, look how dirty this is. It's really, really crusty under there. So just separating the back here, just got to gently push these clips down until they snap through the gap. Very carefully, you'll break them off. So you can see I did the top row there first, and the middle row just onto the bottom row here now. There we go, that's separated, as you can see. You need to clean the side there as well. So I cleaned the metal part of the keyboard case here, but you can see we've got corrosion that's come through all of the little vents here, so we're going to have to, not vents, where the support pullers go through to the plastic part of the case there. So I need to scratch all that back to bare metal, get all the red rust off there, and then just use a bit of WD-40 on there just to treat that around those areas. So just cleaning the membrane here, I've done the metal part there, just with a bit of soap and water, but look how dirty that is, absolutely disgusting. Just lightly here, we don't want to use too much because we don't want it seeping in anywhere if there's any gaps or anything, but it's just important to get it all off there because it's going to interfere with the contacts and things, and you never know, it could start to cause damage somewhere if you don't get that dirt and stuff out. And here's the plastic part after going in the sink and having a good scrub. That was the easiest way to do it. I wouldn't waste your time trying to use cotton buds and things, get a scrubbing brush, get it in a sink full of hot soapy water. And you can see, there's no dirt coming off it now, it's just wet. It's super clean that, I just need to just dry it off. So something I learned when I took it to bits actually, is whilst I got the keycaps off okay, no damage at all, not a single broken clip or cap or whatever, that's not really the right way of doing it. The correct way of doing it is to remove the back part first, unclip these plastic clips here through the metal piece, to separate this plastic piece from the metal. And then once you've done that, you'll be able to see the backs of the keys. And I'll show you, if we get the shift back on now, we'll do this in reverse order. So we'll stick a shift, let's do this one down here, I think. So let's get a spring actually. So we've got our spring, let's get the shift key back through there, push it through so the key's on, and like I said, we're doing this the reverse way around, so what you will see, so yeah, these are not easy to get back on, I have to admit. You need to get the metal bit, let's see if I can do it, metal bit back onto there like that, like that, can you see, that's hooked on there, and then you need to get that metal piece into the little slots. There we go, you can see one side's done. So then all you've got to do then is get the other side on. So then just try and lift the other side up here like this, try and hold that in place, and get the other side to slide in at the same time. There you go, can you see that? Then just make sure the bar is totally in there. So you can just do the reverse order. When you come to take one of these apart, once you've got all the keys still in there now, you've took the back off, you can just literally just prise the metal bit, not the plastic because you'll break it, the metal bit out, and when one side comes out, the other side's easy to get out. But we're just doing it in reverse order there. So I'll get the other shift on, and the space bar and the enter key, because those are all the ones that use those little bars. You can only get it one way around because of the shape, the position of those little support pillars there, the plastic ones. So then the trick is going to be to try and work out which way this goes back on here, and I think this is the right way up. And then just gradually start to clip these back in place here, like one row at a time. So starting to look better already actually, with a few keys that I've got back on there, done all the coloured ones. So another quick update, each one of these has been painstakingly hand cleaned actually so far. I'm going to take a break and actually have a go at this, and it's just like the +2 window. This, they've usually, I think they've used the same design they used on the +2, I think, and I think it should just clip out if you're careful with it. You can see it's like clipped in there. It's perhaps not the easiest thing to get out, but in theory we should be able to get underneath. There you go, top's come out. You see that? So you can get underneath there to clean that, and I'm just going to use some plastic polish actually. I'll use some soap and water first, just around the edges, and then some plastic polish on this, and it should look good as new. So that's that piece cleaned up, as you can see, good as new, and a little bit of Maguire's plastics onto here with some tissue, because that way it's non-abrasive, it's super soft. Just do a bit of this on both sides, clean it off. So you can see we're almost done there now, and I'll just show you what I'm doing here. One by one, I've just been going through, over each side of the key here with IPA and a clean bit of paper towel, all four sides, and the dirt comes off pretty easy actually. But the reason I'm doing them separately is because they've got a spring in. I mean, you can pull that spring out, and it's also a question of, I want a perfect job on this. I mean, you could leave them soaking in some oxy action, some vanish or something in the sink, but you're not going to get as clean a job. I've made sure with every one of these that I'm going over every little bit of each key, and they're coming out super clean here. So I think that's on that row there, isn't it? Yeah. So we're getting there. So strangely enough, I've ended with a full stop, and halfway through I was on a comma when I took a break. So yeah, that's irony for you. So we'll just get this last one into position, and you can only get them on one way. If it doesn't go on, you've got it upside down, ones where the key can be reversed, so just don't press too hard when you're putting them back on. So that's pretty good now. There's just the odd bit of dust that's got on there, as from the tissue and stuff, so I'll probably rack that off once I've put it back in the lid. But as you can see, that's looking absolutely fantastic now. So while I'm here, I may as well clean the cassette deck out as well, Cotton Buds IPA, get rid of all this dust, fluff, clean the keys, clean the capstan. Oh god, it's disgusting this. Yeah, I'm not going to bore you with the full thing, I've got plenty of other videos out there where I've looked at cassette decks and things like this. You could watch that video on the Phillips tape deck I did there, or the, I think I did one on the +2, when I changed the belt over and stuff, and one of the ones for the C64 as well. I've got a video for that. So I've covered all the techniques, there's nothing different about this one really. So dust and fluff removed, we'll clean up the heads, do the erase head there with some IPA. God, that's very dirty. actually. Let's clean up that guide thing there. Clean up the main head. And we'll clean up this pinch roller here as well, actually. Just give this a quick going over. And finally, these belts. Strictly speaking, these are going to need replacing probably, but you can do something like this. Just rotate it around a bit with IPA, you know, cotton bud with IPA. Looks very much like a Spectrum Plus 2 deck, this actually. So I've cleaned the belt there, just make sure it's gone round a few times. Have you ever had one of those moments where you've spent like an hour looking for some screws? I swear to God, these just dematerialised and then rematerialised here. I've looked absolutely everywhere. I've been through the rubbish. I've had everything apart in here. I've had every little box open, and it's just driven me nuts. And then lo and behold, there was a piece of paper here, and I thought, surely they're not under that. And I lifted it, and lo and behold, they were. Yeah, well over an hour spent looking for those screws. But now we've got the board back in there. The case is super clean. We can start to screw it back together and give it a try. So before I reassemble this, I'm going to stick a few heat sinks on some of the key chips here, namely, well, the gate array and the CRT generator down here. It's a Hitachi chip, I think. Strictly speaking, with these types of heat sinks, one in the centre is probably enough on its own, but I'll stick 3 because I've just got tons of these things. The side ones are not going to absorb as much heat because the die is going to be in the centre of the chip there. But I'm also going to just take this board back out because it's not screwed in just now, and stick some 47 microfarad caps, one under the graphics chip here and one under the gate array, because there's hardly any smoothing on this. In fact, there's none. There's literally none on this board. There are no electrolytics whatsoever, and it might just help with the video. So this is the graphics chip here, continuity. I'm just going to measure from the ground first of all on one of the TTL chips to this chip. See if we can find the ground. Yeah, ground's pin 1, and they're going to do the same thing from VCC on one of the TTL chips. See if we can find where the 5 volts on the other side actually. Pin 20 by the looks of things. Yeah, so I'm going to go, stick a cap on the underneath from here, this being the positive, to the nearest ground, and I'm guessing one of these rails here might be ground. Let's just see if we can measure those. Yeah, that side of that cap is there, so I can go between that pin there and the pin on there. Just add a 47 microfarad. So I added 2 bypass caps there, 47 microfarad under the CRT graphics chip, and 1 over here under the gate array, just so that the supplies to those are smoothed. There we go, final look at the board before I get the lid on. So with these ribbons, I would do the outer one first here, make sure it's straight into the slot, and then try and support it so you push it straight downwards like that, super carefully, and then do the same with the other one. That's it. So the only real marks on this are actually on the underside. We've got one there, may come off with a bit of IPA, I'm not sure, but it's not a big deal, they're on the underside anyway. But I thought while we're here, we'll mark this one up with a label as well, actually. Can you guess what it's going to be? Bear in mind it's super wide, so we'll go with a super wide label actually. There we go. Yeah, it's looking a success. Super clear display as well now. And there we go, it's loaded again. Excellent. So hopefully you'll agree here that this looks absolutely fantastic. It's good as new. I'm amazed at how well that's actually come out. Excellent, condition. So I've not got any more games to test with at this stage. I will get a DDI 3, I think it's called, fits in the disk drive slot there, whatever it is on the back. That was thanks to Novabug. I mentioned him at the start of this video, but seriously, check out his channel. He's a huge Amstrad fan there. There's nothing he probably hasn't covered on his channel yet, or nothing he doesn't know. You can ask him, you know, any question about any of the Amstrad stuff, and I'm sure he will know. He's the source of all knowledge to do with everything Amstrad. You can see I got this with one of these Amsoft joysticks here. I'm not sure what model it is, JY2. I mean, it's an awful thing. It looks a bit like an SJS1. I'm guessing Amstrad used the same manufacturer. Well, they got them manufactured themselves, didn't they? They'll use the same factories and things, and they used a very similar design for the SJS1. It's interesting it's got a pass-through here. That's something I didn't realise. I thought Amstrad's had 2 joystick ports, but they don't. And then I also got one of these, which is the sound system. What's it called? There we go, SSA1. So I got a manual with it as well. Speech synthesizer for the Amstrad CPC 464. So I'll perhaps have a look at that in a future video, but I think I'll need some sort of way to load software first, you know, because other than cassette, unless I get the cassette that came with this, plug this in, it doesn't do anything. I'm guessing it needs some software. You can see you've got a 3.5mm socket on each side there and a volume knob, and plug your speakers in. We've got 2 speakers here, again Amstrad branded, they're quite nice. So we'll have a look at that in a future video. And I got a box there for my Chase HQ as well from the Hit Squad. So a special thanks to Novabug for helping me with this, you know, giving me various links for things to download, you know, where I can get some of the ROM images and technical information, diagrams and things like that. It was very useful. Do check out his channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.